Nature of Society Part 4, Session 8R. This week we are looking at a new and important topic. The topic is physical planning, housing, infrastructure, and environmental conservation. It is a very important topic, as we will all see in due course. Site value taxation is at the heart of the success of any community's physical planning, its housing policy and provision, infrastructure provision, and environmental conservation. In fact, SVT has been the missing link of why these issues have been deemed to be failures in the majority of countries in the world. We begin with a quotation from Seymour Rauch's publication entitled Economic Answers to Ecological Problems, and it is this: if zoning against unwise land use is to dissipate more problems than it creates, zoning must be accompanied by rules of tenure comparable to those suggested for pollution control and conservation of resources. All sites subject to zoning should be tenured through the payment of rates, taxes, based on up-to-the-moment full market value. Unearned benefits from zoning would vanish. Balance would be struck between the prospective users of land and yielders of title thereto. Sites would transfer at reasonable costs. Then the free market would show its powerful ability to please and render innocuous the putative limits to growth due to zoning, with such devices as cluster development, country-sited townhouses, and imaginative multi-dwelling design. The pertinent 2030 Sustainable Development Goal with respect to physical planning, housing, infrastructure, and environmental conservation is goal number 11. This goal seeks to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. There has been minimal progress regarding the eradication of slum settlements globally in urban centers, as this population has reduced from 39 to 30% between the years 2000 and 2014. Notwithstanding this reduction, cities are expanding beyond its administrative boundaries outwards and placing great strains on the necessary attendant services that are required for satisfactory city living. Pollution levels in urban centers are also a problem, with ambient air pollution on average 2.5 times the maximum acceptable levels, affecting about half the urban dwellers. The response to this, as of 2015, has been the development of national-level urban policies in 142 countries, with 82 of them already implementing mitigation protocols, and 23 such countries reaching the monitoring and evaluation stages. To give an idea of the extent of urban populations living in slums across the developing world, the following statistics are applicable as at 2015. In sub-Saharan Africa, the percentage living in urban slums is 55%. In Southern Asia, the percentage is 31%. In Southeast Asia, 27%. In Eastern Asia, 27%. In Western Asia, 25%. In Oceania, 24%. Latin America and the Caribbean, 20%. And in North Africa, 11%. The average of these for slum dwelling in the urban developing world is 30%, translating into a total of 880 million persons. Here are some more facts that gives the stark reality of urbanization in the developing world. Global urban populations have quadrupled since 1950. Cities in the developing world account for 90% of the world's urban growth. In 2007, global urban population became equal to the global rural population. global urban population will continue to rise and will reach 5 billion by 2030. By 2070, 70% of the global population will be city dwellers. Between 2000 and 2030, population growth rate in urban areas will be 2.3% per year in the developing world. Although housing in urban centers is critical all over the world, it is particularly critical in the lesser developed countries. Here there are inadequate housing, overcrowding, deplorable urban environments, degrading public infrastructure, outright homelessness, and unyielding poverty. All the statistics given thus far are from the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals Report 2016. Despite the above listed statements, urbanization offers more efficient economies of scale with respect to the provision of goods and services and transportation. What is required is planning and management that is risk-informed and sound. Urban areas can be ideal areas for innovation, growth, and sustainable development. Urbanization has been defined as agglomerations of multifunctional settlements of substantial size. It can contribute to sustained economic growth, which can reduce poverty. When there is too much rural-urban migration without this economic growth, then the challenges listed hitherto arise. Ideal urbanization is where there is improvement in urban function and quality, city renewal, and optimization of urban spatial organizations. This will support economic and social development, health systems, and mitigate poverty. Uncontrolled urbanization leads to unsustainable development, particularly housing, and this is prevalent throughout the developing world. There is an absence of location planning and layout and the appropriate infrastructure design. Compounding this is high population growth rates, inflated real estate prices, influx of rural migrants, and inadequate civil services. Most unfortunately, there are few attempts at developing and implementing planning policies. Without these planning and implementation efforts, the existing infrastructure and housing cannot accommodate the burgeoning demands placed on them. Whilst governments may not execute the works themselves, they do have responsibility to ensure that quality infrastructure and housing is provided for the eventual health and well-being of the members of the community. Certainly in developing countries, these are not being provided, and it is the purpose of this session and others to show how this can be made possible. We will begin with physical planning, then treat with environmental management and conservation, and what the effective protocols should be. Then continue with infrastructure management, transportation, and what the responses to the concerns of the various stakeholders can be. Physical planning. In every country of the world, there are communities and areas that receive more favorable infrastructure, education, health, and recreational facilities than others. These communities enjoy better living standards, have better access to state resources and services, are healthier and better educated. These communities are invariably near population centers, but within enclaves in suburban sections. They would enjoy the best that the country has to offer, and although household incomes are larger here, the tax dollars spent in these areas are far greater than in other less endowed areas. Those citizens living in these poorer areas are clearly disadvantaged socio-economically and may be paying just as much tax proportionately as those persons living in more amenable locations. In any event, the state has an obligation of providing fair and equitable facilities and services to all its citizens and should not discriminate. One of the main goals of any enlightened and progressive national physical planning policy is not only to strive for orderly development, but equitable spatial development as well. Physical development in many countries, more so in developed ones and less so in developing ones, is governed by national physical development plans. These plans are overarching concepts of development zones in the physical areas of the country, where the best applicable development locations for specific activities are identified. That there is so much prevalence of unplanned development, particularly in the developing world, is symptomatic of an inadequacy or non-existence of the particular planning exercise, as well as the absence of a mechanism that ensures that all citizens tangibly benefit in the planning outcomes. If elaborate plans are drawn up, only to find that most citizens cannot afford to purchase the lands upon which they must provide themselves with shelter and or production facilities, then the exercise would have failed. Planning outcomes must be utilitarian. That is, they must benefit the greatest number of citizens. Let us have a break now. Physical development in most countries are governed by statute, most likely a Planning Act or a Planning and Development Act, and these are for orderly and environmentally sound physical development in urban and rural areas. These legislations, while providing explicit guidelines for the best development, do not attempt to initiate it. This passive nature of the legislation allows the developers to proceed unhurried, with landholders responding to development needs speculatively. The result then is the proliferation of unplanned development, evidence of the unbalanced factors of production at work. As the opening quotation in this chapter suggests, all sites subject to zoning should be tenured through the payment of rates, taxes, based on up to the moment full market value. Unearned benefits from zoning would vanish. Balance would be struck between prospective users of land and yielders of title thereto. Sites would transfer at reasonable cost. Then the free market would show its powerful ability to please and render innocuous the putative limits to growth due to zoning, with such devices as cluster development, country-sited townhouses, and imaginative multiple dwelling design. This shift of demanding the payment of the full market value rate to the community will make all the difference to the development prospects there. No longer would landholders benefit in windfall overnight when decisions are taken to change land usage, as such changes would commensurate with an applicable change in the market rate payment. Lobbying and payments of under-the-table bribes to officials to change the development usage would no longer be worthwhile to pursue. When a highway or other major thoroughfare is proposed to pass through areas, the adjacent lands will increase in value, will now meet new rate obligations consistent with their appraised values. Unearned income, which is the bane of the system of capitalism, or for that matter any economic system, will be significantly eradicated, allowing for utilitarianism, the greatest benefit to the greatest number. This form of communal compensation for changing land use is ideal for the inevitability of the growth of communities over time. As populations grow and economies develop, lands that were deemed appropriate for residential usage will become more suitable for commercial purposes. Lands that were used for agriculture will become amenable for residential use when the need for more housing arises. Lands that were reserved as forestry would find that there is a societal need to convert these to agricultural use. The point is that the pressure of the population growth would increase land values and change land use, and it is this demand for land use change that dictates physical development plans. The application of market value rates would hasten the development of new physical development plans. In other words, when there are wholesale changes in site values, it is probably time to upgrade physical development plans. The policy of allowing changes in site values to dictate the upgrade of physical development plans would allow for more orderly development of communities. If this is the case, we would unlikely see a mix of sites carrying out the different types of economic activity: residential, commercial, industrial, and agricultural. Under SVT, site holders would not likely occupy a site and carry out an activity for which they are paying a higher rate than would be the case than if they are occupying a site designated for that use. SVT then would force orderliness and would give the planning authorities the freedom to plan and manage ideal communities, whatever the economic activity be. Town planners and land valuators traditionally do not work together. Town planners produce plans and valuators come into the picture after the plans are let to issue valuation reports. A more collaborative approach that will lead to better physical planning would be to determine land values by surveying the market and determining what would be the best economic activities in the various areas, and development plans then be based on what these values are primarily. Town planners and their plans would be informed by these values, as well as other spatial considerations and environmental conservation. Flowing from the work of the land valuators and town planners, certificates of development potential, CDP, would be issued to all landowners, leaving aside for the moment those lands that are not endowed with adequate infrastructural development, and slum areas, which will be designated future development areas. Once these CDPs are issued, the current market site value of these sites are also listed in this correspondence, and these are also listed in the local gazette. Two authorities would have to be set up to administer the system, namely the Land Value Authority and the Land Value Commission. The Land Value Authority would list land values annually, issue correspondences to landowners, list these values in the Gazette, local newspapers, and on its website, recommend to the legislature the site value taxes in the various areas for ratification, and defend its work before the Land Value Commission should litigation with landowners arise. This then is the template for orderly physical development in any community that adopts an SVT approach to raising revenue. What more can we say of this before we end today? Next week we will continue our discussion on this subject. Before we end, I would like again to let your attendees know that Unsustainable Development is an educational offering devoted to the dissemination of its cause to all of mankind and to those who have the English language as their official language in the first instance, and to all, eventually all over the world. We have in fact been sending this course all over the English-speaking world with very favorable responses. To continue to make this possible, and because we do not charge a fee for this dissemination, we rely wholeheartedly on monetary donations to meet the cost of achieving these goals. If you have found these sessions useful thus far and would like others to have access to them, we would gratefully accept your donations should you be inclined to offer them. You can send donations to our PayPal account at the email address nigelgittins@gmail.com. Thank you for your kind gesture.